Hey, and welcome back to Wheat Beat. My name is Mike, and today we're going to talk about deck ovens. How exciting is that? Now, in case you missed it, this is part 4 of my series on building a micro bakery, in this case, in my own home. So feel free to go back and look at those past videos to get caught up. But today, in my process, we need to make decisions on an oven because I have to tell the electrician and the plumber and the HVAC guy what exactly I need to do there. So we need to make some final decisions on that. And that's what we're going to get into the details of today. Now, some people have never heard the term deck oven and others are very familiar with it. But in order for me to give you the scoop on this, I probably need to give you a few details on what a deck oven is in case you're not familiar with it. Now, when you say bread, most professional bakers think deck oven because that is the appliance of choice. It's purpose built just for baking bread. Now, here's what one looks like. They're usually deeper than they are wide, so less heat gets through the door. And also notice that the ceiling is low so that the heating source from the top is closer to the loaves and the bake is more even. There are no fans inside to move air, so the way the bread bakes is through conduction, which means the dough directly touches a hot floor, and radiation, which is the heating that occurs through electromagnetic waves that you feel on your face, for example, when you're in front of a fire or like facing the sun or something like that. Now, deck ovens are also very well sealed because they have to hold heat, obviously, but also they need to hold steam. Steam is a big topic. We'll talk about it in another video, but suffice it to say the deck oven has to hold it pretty well to do a good job baking bread. Now, there are some problems with deck ovens. They tend to be really big and really heavy, and that's because they have to hold all that heat, and they have really thick stone floors in most cases. Now, because they're so big and heavy, they also tend to be really expensive, and they're not really practical to run, for baking 1 or 2 loaves of bread because it takes a lot of energy and a lot of time to heat up a deck oven. They're also really purpose-built machines, so they have low ceilings, as we talked about, so you can't really put your Thanksgiving turkey in there. You can't even put certain breads like panettone or Pandora, or things are too tall. So it's not practical really for anything other than baking bread. So that's a brief introduction to a deck oven. Now let's talk about my specific case. You remember from past videos, I have this room that's 10 by 20 feet. It's got a 36-inch opening for a door. That's pretty much the gist of my floor space for this oven. Now, my specific criteria was it needs to be 240 volt, one phase, and which is the majority of what residential electrical is. I will really want steam to be self-generating in this oven. As I probably said before, this is not something that comes typically with an all oven, so you have to really look out for that it has self-generating steam in it. So that was a big criteria. I also wanted a service person who was kind of familiar with this oven, so someone in the US that is heard of a brand that I want to work with so that I don't get left out to dry, hung out to dry if something should happen to this oven, because you can't really take it to the store with you, obviously. Now, I researched a lot of oven manufacturers. In fact, I think about 10 different oven manufacturers I researched, but I spoke a lot with Michelle Suis, who I introduced in past videos, and also Didier Rosada, who's a master baker who I have the utmost respect for. He's an amazing instructor, an amazing baker, and they both recommended a company called LC Bakery, which is out of Canada. It's a family-run operation, and I've actually used their ovens before in a class that I took in Petaluma at Central Milling, another awesome place to take classes if you want to advance your baking skills. Suffice it to say, this is a really good oven. It's a really good manufacturer, but there were some problems with working with LC Bakery. They have a kind of a long lead time. The oven that I was looking at getting that Michelle and Didier recommended had about a 6-month lead time, which is huge. And also the freight costs from Canada are very high. And the oven itself is very, very expensive. Now, the oven I looked at had a proofer retarder built into it to save space, which is great. But when you look at a 2-deck oven with a proofer retarder built in and a loader, the cost was going to be, drum roll please, are you ready for this? You want to take a guess? It was $50,000, and that's without taxes. So that's huge. And I know it's a really high quality oven, but my hope was that maybe there would be an alternative manufacturer out there that could still make a very high quality oven for me, and possibly for less money and be a little bit more US based perhaps. So I started looking into other manufacturers. Enter Alberto DeCiso. He's from Forza Pizza. Definitely check him out at forzapizza.com. He's a really cool guy. He knows his stuff. He's very dedicated, and he and I had a lot of conversations about manufacturers for deck ovens, and he turned me on to American Baking Systems, ABS. No, it's not what's in your car. They're a really big deck oven manufacturer. In fact, they do a lot of baking supplies, but one of the things they're good at is deck ovens. And the reason I know they're good, because I've seen their ovens at Whole Foods Bakery. So I know they're reputable. And when I spoke to a service tech here in the US, he immediately knew what I was talking about. It was different than LC Bakery, that when I asked the service technician about LC Bakery, he kind of looked at me confused. He'd never heard of it, but a lot of service technicians in the US have heard of ABS. So I called ABS and I spoke to them. They're actually very helpful, and they definitely gave me a lot of information that I was looking for. One of the good things about them is that they have the oven that I want in stock. They can actually ship it to me right now if I'm ready to buy it. And then obviously they're US based, so it's a lot easier to work with them and a lot less expensive in terms of freight and things like that. Now, one of the things I asked them was, hey, can I just buy one deck, because that's going to save me a little bit more money, and then as my operation gets bigger, then I can buy another deck. And the person I spoke to at ABS basically said, look, you can do that, but when you factor in the cost of installation and the cost of freight and other expenses, it makes much, much, much more sense to buy all the decks that you think you're going to need now rather than later. And actually that made a lot of sense. So in my case, that would be a 2-deck oven. When it came down to the cost, even though I took out the proofer retarder built in, which I'm sure adds a lot of expense, but just the 2-deck oven on wheels, like with a frame basically, was going to be about 1/4 of the cost of what it would cost me with LC Bakery. And again, to be perfectly fair, it doesn't come with a built-in proofer retarder, but still the cost difference was tremendous. So for me, that made a lot more sense, because I would get exactly what I want for a lot less money. And that's the oven I think I've decided to go with. And now that I've made that decision, I have all the specs that I need, so I can give it to the electrician and the plumber and everybody else to do their part. But I'm not done yet, because obviously I still need more equipment. I need a convection oven, for example. And so we're going to get into that in the next video, where I can go over what was decided for that. And that's actually a work in progress, but by the next video I'll have it ready. So don't forget to subscribe, so that when that video is uploaded, you get to know right away. And until then, go bake something.